The Batman Beyond episode, Terry's Friend Dates a Robot, is often remembered as a light, Silver Age of comics inspired story. A sci-fi romance built around a socially awkward teenager ordering a robotic girlfriend, with things predictably going very wrong. But that reading only accounts for the plot mechanics and not the intent. This episode blends romantic fantasy and science fiction in a way that reflects a much older tradition in comic storytelling, while also engaging with issues of emotional dependence, control, and autonomy. And those ideas become more interesting when you consider the people behind the story. Although the script was written by John P. McCann, the story itself was drafted by Paul Dini, who, as I'm sure we all know, is one of the definitive Batman writers in the last 30 years. What makes this story particularly interesting is pairing it with Dini's autobiographical comic Dark Knight, a true Batman story, published in 2016. Looking at that memoir doesn't turn this episode into an autobiography, but it does provide useful context, particularly for the titular character of Howard Groote, whose optimism and romantic expectations drive the story. From there, Terry's Friend Dates a Robot starts to look less like a joke episode, and more like a deliberately constructed story about what happens when devotion is treated as a design feature that cannot be overridden. Howard Groote is introduced as a familiar type, socially awkward, short, pudgy, and absolutely desperate to be seen as one of the cool kids. He wants to be popular, he wants attention, and above all he wants a girlfriend. He's nice enough, but he isn't subtle and not particularly self-aware. Still, he is kind of likeable. When he tries his luck with girls that are way out of his league, they seem to spare his feelings, while the jocks resort to light hazing instead of outright bullying. Even his preferred name, Howie, infantilizes him. He's a bit of a joke to people, but they can't bring themselves to torment him. He's just too chipper. His early scenes at Hamilton Hill High position him as someone chasing an idealized version of teenage life, rather than accepting the life he has. Visually, Howie was modelled on Paul Dini, although much shorter, and I think that likeness matters not because it turns the character into an autobiography, but because it signals authorial interest. You could be mistaken for thinking that Howie is a random joke character or a one-note punchline, but there's more to him than that. This entire episode is mostly told from his perspective. What defines Howie more than anything else is his optimism. He is relentlessly hopeful, to the point that it borders on delusion. Rejection doesn't discourage him, embarrassment doesn't slow him down, and social failure barely registers as a warning sign. He believes that if he just finds the right gesture, the right party, the right girl, or the right look, everything will fall into place. He reminds me a lot of another Dini creation, Sid the Squid from Batman the Animated Series, another diminutive figure that sought status, and I've done a video all about him which I've linked to in the info button, so add that to your watch later list if you want to hear more. Like Sid, Howie's optimism is not portrayed as malicious, it's more naive. Howie doesn't resent the people who ignore him, and he doesn't seem to interrogate why his approach fails. Instead, he assumes that success is a matter of presentation and persistence more than anything else. That assumption is what makes the idea of a synthoid girlfriend appealing. This is a lifelike machine that has been programmed to act like his girlfriend and adore him to a fault. His difficulty with dating is therefore less about shyness and more about unrealistic expectations. Howie isn't looking for a meaningful relationship that will deepen with time and effort. He just wants a status symbol that will let everyone know that he's important. Once he gets his synthoid girlfriend, who he calls Cynthia, get it? It's funny that his plan actually pays off. People see him walking around with a mysterious, towering beauty, and they treat him with more respect, which I guess speaks more to the shallowness of his peers than anything else. Now, this is a good time to go back to Paul Dini's autobiographical story. In this comic, Dini presents himself as someone who consistently invested deeply in romantic possibilities that never fully materialize. His dates with aspiring actresses are framed as hopeful turning points, moments where effort and sincerity could be rewarded, only for that optimism to collapse under indifference, ignorance, or misunderstanding. What's striking is not just the failure of these relationships, but how persistently Dini returns to them with the same expectation intact, and in some ways, this makes him seem like a glutton for punishment. But that's not to say that he's bitter or cynical. Instead, Dini portrays his romantic life as a series of attempts to align fantasy with reality, to find a connection with someone who is so completely and utterly wrong for him, even though he knows it's unlikely to pay off. Dini seems to chase after women that he knows he has no chance with because he has faith that life follows narrative rules, that if he just sticks at it, eventually the women will see him the way he sees himself, and I'm sure a lot of people have also done this because I know I have. When two people share trust, humour, vulnerability and time together, it's easy to assume those ingredients should eventually lead to romance. Popular fiction reinforces this constantly. Persistence is rewarded, affection wins out, and timing fixes everything. If you've internalised those stories, as Dini very clearly has when he recounts his childhood living inside of his imagination, continuing to hope seems normal. And I want to be clear that Dini doesn't seem manipulative or entitled at all. He isn't trying to pressure anyone into changing their feelings. Instead, he seems to believe that being open, kind and emotionally available ought to count for something. When it doesn't, the confusion results in disappointment, not anger, and in one heartbreaking instance, self-harm. And it's really important to stress that Dini doesn't frame these experiences as betrayal, even though I'm sure that he may have felt that way at times. It's easy to look at his reinvention of the Mad Hatter from Batman the Animated Series as a bitter incel and draw the wrong conclusions about him. But I'd argue that his experience helped him write a compelling character because Jervis Tetch's feelings felt true. It's the way that he dealt with those negative feelings that made him a villain. And to be clear, the women in his life aren't villains, and he doesn't cast himself as a victim of deception. Instead, the pain comes from the gap between expectation and reality, from believing that emotional labour naturally leads somewhere, when in fact it often doesn't. That outlook maps neatly onto Howie. He doesn't think that his peers owe him romance or respect. Really, he's chasing the idea that desire, effort and optimism will eventually be rewarded. The tragedy in both cases is not so much that they are rejected, it's the belief that rejection is a problem to be solved rather than an answer to be accepted. Seen this way, Dini's raw honesty in Dark Knight demonstrates faith in stories, in connection, and in the hope that if you show up fully, someone else will eventually meet you there. The problem is, as Dark Knight makes clear, is that real relationships don't follow story rules. The difference is that Dark Knight is written in a more realistic way, while Terry's friend dates a robot stages it as a farce. And I think that this is because humour is a natural coping mechanism for despair. If you can't cry about it, you can make a joke of it to minimise it. But Howie isn't the only character that resembles Dini's experience. I'd argue that Cynthia is just as much a reflection of Dini as Howie is. The DC animated universe had several excellent episodes that question the nature of what it means to be alive. See also the Batman the Animated Series episode His Silicon Soul, and any Superman episode with Metallo in it. And Cynthia feels like a natural progression of this idea. Unlike Betas's duplicates, controlled by Hardak, these synthoids act independently, but must follow their core programming with little autonomy. Bruce Wayne's synthoids are designed for Terry to test his skill against, and when Howie accompanies Terry to collect an order for some replacements after he got a bit too rough during his last exercise, Howie meets the unscrupulous Louis. One look at Howie and Louis assumes that he'd be the sort of person that would be into his special, read illegal, custom orders. Companion synthoids. Even though he reminds Howie that it is against the law, he's willing to do it for the right price. And Cynthia is made exactly to his specifications, completely devoted to him, 100% loyal, 5'7", medium-length red hair, and the coolest green eyes. And maybe she is programmed just a little too well. Cynthia is Howie's dream girl, but that's not actually what he wants. He's not out for sexual gratification. He wants the status of having a woman like that be interested in him. He wants to be popular through association. Cynthia has no goals or aspirations of her own. She just lives to please Howie, who uses her as a trophy and little else. When Cynthia rejects high school bully Nelson Nash, saying that she's only interested in Howie, Nelson reacts angrily, saying that he's gonna have to put Howie in his place, which is such a healthy response to rejection, and as such, Cynthia attempts to kill him. Likewise, when social butterfly Chelsea Cunningham starts to show an interest in Howie, simply because everyone has decided that he's popular now, Cynthia reacts angrily, trying to crush her under the Hamilton Hill High School sign. Later that evening at a party at Howie's place, the most happening place in town, Howie decides that Cynthia has served her purpose. People think he's cool now, and one girl even wants to date him, and so he tries to break things off with her. In an effort to placate her, he even suggests that they could remain friends. Ouch. And Cynthia's reaction is just perfection. She was literally built to exist for Howie, and when his vision of their relationship changes, her system cannot accommodate the contradiction. Her rage is inevitable, but it is also a visual metaphor, the internal collapse of hope. Viewed along Dark Knight, I think that this scene makes clear that Cynthia is also representative of Paul Dini. In the comic, he describes repeatedly being friend-zoned while maintaining hope for romance, even when circumstances clearly indicated it wasn't going to happen. In his imagination, he thinks of scenarios where he walks out, accepting that he had misread the situation and wishing them the best, but in reality he sits there and feels crushed by the indignity of it all. Cynthia externalizes those feelings as sparks fly from her head. The rage and destruction are a cartoony but cathartic representation of the emotional collapse Dini experienced internally. In this sense, the episode stages a controlled thought experiment. What happens if boundless optimism is untempered by reality or consent? The answer is literal chaos as Cynthia goes on a rampage and only Batman can stop her. At the episode's conclusion, Howie survives, but the truth about Cynthia is exposed and his new friends reject him. To make matters worse, his parents come home after he had maxed out their credit card to buy Cynthia and their home is in flames. Regardless, Howie is still optimistic, and I think that's the best joke of all. Here, Silver Age comedy meets psychological insight, showing both the charm and danger of treating love as something you can control. At its core, Terry's Friend Dates a Robot is a story about hope, desire, and the consequences of treating love as a tangible object. Howie embodies the charm and the danger of boundless optimism, a boy who believes that persistence, devotion, and appearances alone can shape reality. Cynthia, in turn, dramatizes what happens when that optimism encounters limits beyond one's control: chaos, destruction, and the sudden collapse of fantasy. By linking this narrative to Paul Dini's Dark Knight, we see that the episode is more than just a parody of teen romance mixed with robot technology. It's an exploration of the same emotional tension Dini lived with, the struggle to reconcile expectation with reality, and the difficulty of accepting that not every hopeful gesture will be returned. Cynthia's explosive reaction crystallizes that tension in visual and literal terms, a farcical exaggeration of a very real emotional experience. Ultimately, Terry's Friend Dates a Robot works because it layers comedy, action, and psychological insight. Howie remains relentlessly naive, Cynthia explosively volatile, and the audience is left with the fact that hope can be radiant, devotion can be noble, but insisting that love follow the rules of optimism is a gamble. A gamble that can delight, a gamble that can amuse, a gamble that can explode, and sometimes all three at once. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time. When I return on Monday, it'll be time to go back to the results of my latest The Batman Villain Poll and talk about an obscure duo from that show that were intended to be the villainous counterparts to Batman and Robin. Yes, it's time to talk about Wrath and Scorn. And next Friday, I'm following up on the question I asked in my prototype video. I asked if anyone was interested in seeing a video about Steel, and you responded with a resounding yes. So, we'll talk about John Henry Irons next. Hope to see you then.